Hey everybody, there was some amazing, fantastic news today about COVID-19 out of New York that I want you to know about that you may not have heard about. And I think it's so important, and that's why I'm posting this today. Second reason I'm posting this is I've in the past liked to have discussions on social media because I've got a really wide, I'm fortunate to have a wide circle of a diverse group of people that are my friends where we can exchange ideas and perspectives. That's been hard to do recently, so I've kind of stopped doing it, but I've started again. And then really importantly, I want people out there to know that if they're thinking something, you're not the only one thinking it. And sometimes it feels like we are and we're going crazy, right? Because, honestly, honest discussion a lot of times just gets stamped down. I'm going to get to the great news out of New York, but first I want to just do a little math thing. And when Ken Montgomery's doing math, we're in trouble. But real quickly, I want to talk about how we get a rate of something. And a rate of something is you have a numerator and a denominator, okay? So let's take a death rate. If the general population is 50 people and 5 people die from something in the general population, the death rate there is 1 of 10 or 10%. If the denominator goes up a lot, that means the rate goes down. So if you have those same 5 people who died, and now the number of people that were in the population is 500, that means the death rate is 1%. And that's what we're going to talk about with New York, because it's amazing and it's great. There were 2 recent studies and some other ones, but 2 in particular that came out in California, Northern California and Southern California, Santa Clara County, LA County with Stanford and USC, that had different methodologies, different population samples, different parameters, and in disparate locations. And along with some other studies, they came out with the same findings regarding COVID-19 infectious rate. And why that's important is while these need to be peer-reviewed vigorously, all science should be vigorously, honestly peer-reviewed. When people who are doing studies in disparate areas using different samples and different methodologies come out with the same outcomes, you start to raise your eyebrows out and say, hey, that's pretty interesting. And this is where the New York stuff comes in. So the state of New York has been announcing COVID cases and COVID deaths. COVID deaths, COVID cases, okay? The death rate's been appalling, or the mortality rate's been appalling, and this is what we call a case mortality rate. It's been 5%, right? So understandably, people are very concerned about that and whatnot, but we've all kind of suspected that there were a lot more people that had COVID-19 than the case rate. So just today, the state of New York announced that upwards of 20% of the population of New York City and 15% of the population of the state in general has tested positive for antibodies to COVID-19. That is astoundingly great news, because what that tells us is the death rate, or the mortality rate, which is now the infectious mortality rate, it's 0.5%, not 5%. So it's 1/10, just literally overnight. We've learned the death rate is 1/10 of what we previously thought it was. And what does that mean? Well, the best case scenario that we were told for all these lockdowns was that the death rate might be 2.5% of the population, and the worst case scenario went up to 4.5%. What we're learning is that the infectious mortality rate at 0.5% is anywhere from 1/5 to 1/9 of the best to worst case scenarios. And that's incredibly, phenomenally great news. Now, why is that important? Because it should inform how we conduct public policy. And part of what we've heard about when we're going to end this lockdown, when we're going to get society back up and running, is based on a few different factors. Will we have a vaccine? Will we have wide testing? Will there be a cure? Well, that's doubtful. We don't have a cure for the common flu or the cold, and we don't worry about that. And then the other thing is, will we acquire herd immunity? And what's happening in New York is indicative that, in fact, herd immunity is happening, and it's happening without dire consequences, okay? 20% of the population has been exposed to COVID-19, and a small fraction of a percent of that population has experienced mortality. And here's the other great thing. COVID-19 doesn't attack the general population. In fact, it doesn't attack children, who are most vulnerable to the flu. It's an opportunistic virus that's very weak, that only goes after a certain segment of the population, primarily people over 60 who have existing health conditions. and the general population, what we call comorbidity, or what's called comorbidity conditions. And I'll give you an example of that. A friend of mine posted on Facebook that her friend passed away from COVID-19, but her friend was 500 pounds. Seriously. That is technically morbidly obese. That is, by definition, a comorbidity issue. We don't want that person to die. You shouldn't die because you're morbidly obese, right? But that's what COVID-19 attacks. So the public policy issue then becomes, who do we isolate? And if we need to get herd immunity, right? If that's one of our conditions, well, the only way you get herd immunity is being exposed to the virus. So you can't get exposed to the virus if you're in isolation. You can't get exposed to the virus if you're wearing a face mask out, right? Because the idea of wearing the face mask out is to keep you from spreading or acquiring the virus. That's the whole very idea behind it. So it's in contradiction, right? It's contradictory to what we're saying. So this is phenomenally great news, everybody. And really what it leads to is what Dr. Paul Offit, who's the head of pediatrics at Children's Hospital in Philadelphia. He is a world-renowned virologist, immunologist. He's consulted with the World Health Organization, which I know many people have issues with. He's consulted with the UN. He is an anti-vaxxer. He is a science-based guy. He, from the very get-go, said that we should be isolating and quarantining, if you will, those most affected, which is a very small percentage of the population, and let the rest of society go on so that we could take care of people and not shut everything down, because there's going to be absolutely unintended consequences that we can't predict, and hence they're unintended. So I just wanted to take a moment to share this incredibly positive news with you. I think it's time we reopen society, given all of these studies that are coming out, given all of this data, empirical data that's coming out. We need to make science-based, data-based decisions and not have them based on hysteria or fear or groupthink. Now, there's been arguments about whether we flip the switch or we have a dimmer. I personally think we can flip the switch with just a little advance notice, but I know most people wouldn't go for that. So my opinion is we can have a dimmer, but the dimmer isn't going to be a slow, take 3 months dimmer. It's going to be a dimmer that goes up like this. So day by day by day, over a course of a couple of weeks, we get society up and running. So anyways, go look for that great news. I'm going to post some links here so you don't have to take my word for it. Folks, we should be excited about this. And I'm going to ask you just one question. If you haven't heard about this news out of New York, which is phenomenal, it's game-changing, maybe we just think about why we haven't heard about it. That opens up a can of worms I don't want to discuss, so I shouldn't have even started, so I'm going to let it go at that. I really want to have a discussion on this. I'd love to see your comments. Keep it respectful. Don't argue with facts. If you're rude, I'm going to delete the comments. I didn't used to moderate the discussions, but I've just learned I've had to in order to keep them productive. I'm really looking forward to talking to everybody. Take care of yourself. Smile. Make somebody else smile, because that's a win-win, because if you make someone else smile, you're sure to smile, okay? Let's have a discussion. I'm going to have a couple of more video posts on a couple of things related to this, so I hope you stick with me, and thanks so much, everybody, okay? Have a good one. Thank you.